just 5 minutes about himself, thank you.
Okay. Well, good evening everyone. My name's John Finnie and I'm the Scottish Green Party candidate. It's not my intention to take up the 5 minutes. I'm more interested to hear what you want to ask us. But I'll give you a brief outline of the Scottish Green Party's position on things generally. We don't want more of the same. The status quo has created problems. So we would take a different approach to many things. We think communities matter. We think the aggregate effect of lots of communities doing things together is far beneficial than central dictatorship. So if I take, for instance, the challenge that we all face as citizens of this planet, it's the same regardless of where we live, it's climate change. And doing more of the same isn't going to help. But there is an alternative, and we've commissioned a detailed report from an academic about the new economy. And that new economy would create over 200,000 jobs, greatly in excess of the current number of oil and gas, by 2035. So it's not about plugging wells, not least because we'll need to have oil for plastics for medicines, but it is about taking a different approach. So where I'll be totally different from my other candidates is that while each of them will be imploring the UK government to give obscenely wealthy multinational oil and gas corporations even bigger tax breaks to go even further, to go even deeper for more resource that the planet can't in any shape or form afford to burn, we are suggesting a different approach. Now, I think it was 30 million, it might have been 40 million that the head man at BP gets as his salary, and that seems to have caused some consternation today. So that's an issue. Inequality is an issue. We're very keen to tackle inequality. Now, I don't suppose anyone's going to stand up here tonight and tell you that they want very poor local services. But if you want good local services, you have to pay for them. And we have progressive plans both in terms of local taxes and in terms of income tax. And our view is that a better Scotland deserves a bolder Holyrood. And a bolder Holyrood with a measured opposition. Because what you'll get from the Scottish Green Party and what the Scottish Government got from my Green colleagues was, if they did something praiseworthy, they were praised. And I think that makes it a lot better and a lot easier to provide constructive criticism. And that's what we would do. So we would be a constructive opposition. Now, in making that statement, you'll realise I've conceded there's not going to be a majority Green government after May. But we are still working in that direction. And long-term solutions that the Green Party offers are the ones that we have to be picked up. And our mantra is people, planet, peace, people first and foremost. If we value people, then we value the services and we value the people that look after them. So we have proposals to increase, and there's opportunities coming with a lot of the powers that's been developed, to increase carers' allowance by 50%. Now that's going to cost 20 million. I suspect the Chair doesn't want us to go into figures, but that's payable. We would tax derelict land. We shouldn't be rewarding people for not making use of property. We would return the ability to local authorities to acquire land. We would repeal the 1959 Town and Country Planning Act. We will look at revisiting and hope within the centenary of the Land Settlement Act of 1919. That was legislation that's put in place to ensure that returning soldiers from the Second World War were given land. We're going to make sure that there is robust land reform. I think the Scottish Government need to be praised for the progress that's been made. But it's not far enough. We have tried to push them in relation to that, in relation to rent reform. So you will get a measured position in relation to all of these matters. And what I want to say finally is that when you come to make your decision, and everyone gets the opportunity to cast a vote in the regionalistic means, look behind the rhetoric. You know, we've all got detailed proposals here, all backed up by academics. But look at what the thrust of things are. Do you want more of the same, or do you want first and foremost to value people and value our communities? There's a better way of doing things, and I hope that will become apparent as you ask your questions out tonight. More than time. Thank you.
Thank you very much all for coming. My name's Donald Cameron. Sorry to disappoint those of you who thought it was David Cameron. Sorry to disappoint those of you who thought it was Donald Trump. Briefly, by way of introduction, John and I are actually from the same part of the world in Lochaber, a place called Carry, just further north from here. My profession, I'm a lawyer who specialises in crofting and agricultural law, and I have a background in farming up in Lochaber as well. I'd like to really start with two themes, a local theme and a national theme. The local theme that I'd like to start with is to talk about the issues that I've come across on the doorsteps on the islands that I visited so far. And like so much of this constituency, there is an issue with predicted depopulation, how to keep our young people in our communities, how to provide them with jobs. There is an issue with infrastructure, the state of our roads, the cost of travel, the reliability of ferries. There is an issue with affordable housing. Another issue that people have mentioned, or mention a lot, is communications. The need for greater mobile phone coverage and better internet access. And clearly, coming from a sort of farming and crofting interest, as it were, I'm particularly sympathetic to the challenges faced by farmers and crofters in our remote communities, the difficulties that they have with poor weather in recent years, the volatile prices experienced, and of course the recent crisis regarding the single farm payment, or the successors of the single farm payment. So my vision is one where we have more people, we have greater investment. Let's keep our young people here, and let's bring more enterprise and more business to our remote communities. My second theme is a national theme. My pitch to you is that only Ruth Davidson and the Scottish Conservatives can hold the SNP to account. Now, like John, I can read the opinion polls, and they point to the likelihood of the SNP being in government. We need a strong opposition to hold the SNP to account. And my pitch is that Ruth Davidson can provide that opposition. And my second point on the national theme is that if you are one of the 2 million voters who in the referendum voted no, we'll stand up for you. We are the only party that is 100% committed to the union. It's in our name, it's in our DNA. I would suggest that Labour and the Liberal Democrats have watered down their commitment to the union. Their leaders have said that their members can campaign on either side in any future referendum. We say the last thing Scotland needs is a return to the bitter division of the referendum. It's time to move on. And my final point is, in this election, you had 2 votes, as you will all well know. And clearly, I would like you to vote for me as the candidate. But I remind you that you also have that second vote. And that second vote, you have the ability to vote for a party. And the only party who can stand up and hold the SNP to account are the Scottish Conservatives. Thank you for listening.
I'm going to ask Reid of the Scottish Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mary Jane, and I'd also like to thank the Community Council for organising the Hustings tonight. There's always a fair bit of work needs to be put into organising an event like this, and last year's went very smoothly. That was thanks to all the work put in. I'm sure this one will as well. So thank you for that, and thank you all for coming out tonight to hear the candidates, allow us to state our pitch. As I'm sure you all know, I was the Member of Parliament for Argyll and Bute for 14 years. I lost the election last year, but the thing that had encouraged me out of the defeat was that my vote actually went up, but such are the vagaries of the first past the post system that the SNP vote went up by more due to the Tory and Labour votes collapsing. That meant the SNP won the seat. Congratulations to Brendan O'Hara for that. But the increase in my vote gave me the confidence to have another go this year. I would approach being a member of the Scottish Parliament in the same way as I approach being a member of Parliament. That is, I see the job as representing my constituency. I was always a backbencher when I was down at Westminster, and I don't expect to get a ministerial job at Holyrood either, because I see the job as representing the constituency. That's what I want to do. That's why every year, every summer, I make sure I get round all the towns and villages and all the inhabited islands in the constituency, holding surgeries in every community. And I worked with local communities, and that's what I would want to continue to do if I was elected as your member of the Scottish Parliament. Here on Mull, one of the achievements that I and my fellow Highlands and Islands Liberal Democrat MPs achieved was getting the fuel duty reduced on the islands by 5 pence a litre of fuel sold at the pumps on the islands. That was a campaign that myself and the other Islands Liberal Democrat MPs had been waiting for a long time, and were delighted when, during the last Parliament, we succeeded. I want to concentrate, as I said, on being your representative. One thing that on a more national basis, one thing that I am absolutely convinced of is that we must put the referendum debate behind us. It was, as Donald said, very divisive. We had that debate. We were promised it was once a generation, and I think that's a promise that should be kept. Because I think we ought to take a lesson from Quebec, where they named having more than one referendum. They called it a never-endum. And as Quebec spent about 30 years debating whether or not to become independent, its economy, compared to the rest of Canada, just declined. And I think that's the danger of where Scotland could be. So I want to put that referendum debate behind us and concentrate instead on delivering good public services. Obviously, the health service is clearly a big issue here, as is mobile phone and broadband. When I was a member of Parliament, that was one of my big campaigns. I mean, the organisation I received most complaints about and spent most time criticising was British Telecom, and they certainly deserved it. And I know from the reports that I'm still getting that they have got no better. But it's important to work with communities to overcome these challenges, and I was delighted here in Mull to work with MICT and with Murray Finch to see what we could achieve. I was along here at the demonstration at this hall 3 years ago of the wireless system that's now become the Giga Plus. So congratulations to MICT for pursuing that project, and I'm sure that will come into reality very soon. But it's very important that everybody in Scotland, every home and business premises gets super fast broadband. We're going to be able to compete with the rest of the world. That is important. And with super fast broadband, that also leaves the mobile phone companies with no excuse for not giving universal 4G mobile phone coverage. Indeed, when I was a member of Parliament, I had Vodafone as well as BT hauled before the Scottish Affairs Select Committee to account for their appalling performance on the Scottish Islands. And the excuse that Vodafone gave was that they couldn't provide a better service was because of the lack of super fast broadband infrastructure. Well, as soon as that infrastructure is provided, Vodafone gave the promise to the committee on the record that they would provide universal mobile phone coverage, and that's a promise that we must keep Vodafone to. I just wanted to reply to one point that Donald said. I mean, he claimed that his party was the only party committed to the Union. Well, that's not the case. The Liberal Democrats are committed to the Union, and Willie Reid is on record in this campaign in saying no more referendums, full stop. I will certainly never vote to have another referendum, and if by any mischance we did have one, I would certainly vote no again, because we cannot continue having that debate. I want to work with you, with the local communities, to grow our economy, grow our population, and make sure that we are prosperous on Mull and the other Scottish Islands, and that we'll have high-quality public services, which we'll be pleased to debate. And I'm sure we'll get questions. The health service is obviously one that's coming up. I'll leave my views on these issues until we get to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll introduce Mr. Mike Russell, MSP at the moment for the Scottish Nationalist Party.
you very much, Mayor Jean, and thank you to Mick and to the Community Council for the opportunity to have these hustings tonight. Slightly surprised by some of the things we've heard about the referendum. I'll come on to that later, but I don't regard any democracy as divisive. I regard the exchange of ideas, the exchange of views, as overwhelmingly positive. And that's what we've got here tonight, and that's what we will have. I've been the MSP for Argyll and Bute for the last 5 years. I've had a ball, I have to say. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and that's why I'm asking people to re-elect me, because I hope I've also been a hard-working and useful MSP to what is one of the largest constituencies in Scotland. I've lived in Argyll for 25 years. I have a career outside politics. I had a career as a writer and somebody deeply involved in the media. And I was the first full-time chief executive of the SNP in the early 1990s, and then I became a member of the Scottish Parliament for the south of Scotland because I was active in the party and active working for the party in Edinburgh. And it was, although I was distressed that my good friend and colleague Jim Mather chose to retire after only one term, I couldn't but see it as an opportunity, and I was delighted to offer myself for election. And in the last 5 years I've done, I hope, the three things that MSPs should do in their constituencies. And the first of them is work for people. I've held surgeries the length and breadth of Argyll and Bute. I've held surgeries in this very hall, and I would fully intend to continue to do so. It's very important that you don't just visit parts of your constituency during the summer. You're there all the time, and you're available to constituents. The second thing I've done is speak up for communities against and in circumstances where there have been real difficulties. With the council, for example, I was elected at the time of the proposals for school closures, which I was very pleased to resist as strongly as I possibly could. You have the present situation of the withdrawal of library services, and I've been involved in trying to make representations on that. And there are a range of bodies who I've had to go and see, one of which is British Telecom, of course. British Telecom has let people down pretty badly on this island throughout the constituency. They've taken their eye off the ball. And it's important that the MSP does a job of representing individuals and communities. And we'll come on to that when we talk later on about the health service, because I've been involved with Billy and with the health group and with the community council on a very intractable problem. And the third thing I've done is to be involved in legislating on behalf of the community. And I've been, in the last year and a half, for example, a member of the committee passing the Land Reform Bill, a very intensive piece of work. But making sure that I understood in this constituency what the issues were, and then representing the views of this constituency to make sure that that legislation was the best thing it could possibly be. And those are the three jobs an MSP have. Now, sometimes you have other jobs. I've been a Scottish Government minister. I was a minister for 7.5 years in 3 different portfolios: in environment, in culture and external affairs and the Constitution, and finally for 5 years as Cabinet Secretary for Education. I came out of government in 2014, and since then I've specialised in rural affairs and my active membership of the Rural Affairs Committee, but I've been involved in a range of other things. Those are the functional jobs. But an MSP's got to do something else too. They've got to have a vision of the type of society they want to see. You don't go into politics just to be mechanistic in your approach. You go into politics because you want to change things. And I'm quite convinced every one of us on this platform has a passion for changing the country and making sure that this country is a better place after the work that we've done. And for me, that is a place that is more just, more fair, more equitable. And that means changes in things like health and education, to go on improving. It means improvements in transportation, of course, and in things like broadband. It means encouraging community generation. It means investing in communities. It means investing in democracy too. This is the first election, it's a parliamentary election, which 16 and 17-year-olds will have the vote. Now, Westminster has not given them that vote, but we have in Scotland. So it means having a view that society has got to keep changing. It's got to keep getting better. And we have to do that in Mull, as we have to do that throughout Argyll and Bute. So when you elect an MSP and you have 2 votes, you're electing an individual who will work for you. And that's the job that I'm applying for, and this is one of the interviews. We're going around doing, I think, 10 public interviews for this job throughout the constituency. And you have a second vote, and the second vote is who you want in government. And I think that that has to be the SNP. I think the track record of the SNP in the last 9 years has been good, not universally so. No government in the full 9 years will get everything right. But it's been solid and workmanlike, and it's been delivering for Scotland. And there is more to deliver. And tonight we'll look at some, I'm sure, some of those issues and topics, and see the ideas that still exist in the SNP and government, and the things that we want to achieve. I think politics is exciting, and I think it's got more exciting in the last decade. There's a great deal still to be achieved, and I think I've still got a bit of fire in me to achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Would I ask Mick of the Scottish Labour Party to give us his 5 minutes, please?
My name is Mick Rice, and those of you that are paying attention, which I assume is all of you because you should always be nice to an audience when you're seeking votes, will have immediately thought with a name like that, he's probably got some Irish heritage. And you would be right. My parents are Irish, or were Irish, because unfortunately they passed away. And the second thing you will have thought is that I'm speaking with an English accent. I have to tell you that I didn't acquire this accent through going to elocution school. I acquired it through having to suffer a childhood being brought up in England. But luckily, for the last 10 years I have been living in Scotland, and you may therefore assume that I have somehow subsumed into my persona the cultural identities of 3 different nations. Or some of you might think that I'm completely confused, but I will leave that until later. But one thing I'm not confused about is about the state of our nation. And what I say to you tonight, because occasionally I write a few little ditties, is that you should beware of the fate of any new state that is small and tiny and wee. For with globalisation, can any new nation really expect to be free? Now I say this because unfortunately the SNP, as far as I'm aware, still want to have a second referendum for independence in Scotland. They haven't changed their position. In effect, what they're saying to you is they want the UK to fail so that they can have the justification for a second referendum. Well, I think that is an awful policy to have, because I want to see a vibrant UK of which Scotland is a strong component part, where we can work together. And I have to say that the slogan, Stronger for Scotland, has a subtext. And if you speak to people down south of the border, that subtext is, stronger for Scotland must mean more for Scotland, and if there's more for Scotland, there's less for us. That is why I think last year, at the last minute, Labour lost in the general election, because people in England and Wales were frightened about the SNP dog waving, SNP tail waving the Labour dog. Now, as a party, I have to say, the Scottish Labour Party is putting forward an anti-austerity programme. We are saying let us use the new tax powers, and we will introduce the 50p tax rate for those earning in excess of £150,000 a year. So we are putting that forward as part of our platform, and we think, therefore, that we can stop any further cuts. We're the only party to say that. We're also saying we're going to abolish the council tax. We'll introduce a new property tax, under which 80% of people in Scotland will be better off. We will cap the property tax at £3,000 per annum. And I have to say that the current council tax is based upon valuations of property which were last done in 1991. That's how bad it has become. And I think that we have to think about our role as electors, because I think, unfortunately, the people in the west of Scotland and in Argyll have been short-changed by the SNP government of Scotland. Because when you think about it, there is capital to put in a dual carriageway on the A9 from Perth to Inverness. I think they deserve it. There is capital, 4 billion or so, to put in the new Forth Road Bridge, but where is the capital for the A83? When is the start date for doing that work? When are people on the west of Scotland going to get some resources to try and mend some of the infrastructure problems we have here? Let's face it, if you have an MSP who's loyal to the Scottish Government, are they going to stand up for you? I think you deserve an MSP that will stand up for our Garland Gute in Holyrood and let them know there what the mood of people is in our Garland Gute. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you heard from the 5 respective candidates, I'm going to ask Billy to take 5 minutes maybe to go over his question again, or do you want me just to... But we've met, as Billy said, with three different cabinet ministers. Alex Neil 2 years ago, and then twice with the current cabinet minister for health and wellbeing, Shona Robertson. I think Neil tasks, particularly the Scottish Ambulance Service, to go and implement a more robust service on Mull, particularly during the months of Whitsun till October, where there can be anything between 20 to 25,000 people on the island. After 20 months, and after the formation of a review board, we've had 20 months of debate back and forward. It's been problematic. We engaged with the community, that fell apart. There's just so many different things. We had an option appraisal that they ended up deciding on an option that wasn't even on the original options appraisal. The community voted 81% for the option that the Community Council had put together on the community's behalf. So that's where we are. And as of yesterday, I think there's one more review meeting because Fiona and Billy pledged yesterday that they couldn't just finish it. And we don't know where we're going now. Okay? Can I ask? Well, Mr. Russell's been very involved in this, so we'll leave you to last, or do you want to?
No, I'm fine. I'm happy to stay till last.
Okay. So if anyone wants to join, would you take it? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think this is key to everything in the Highlands and Islands, and the challenges that are faced in Mull are greatly different from those faced in Caithness with regard to transportation to the main hospital in Inverness. And the challenges just across the water in Armagh, where different models have been looked at. The political scientists will tell you they'll use the term permanence, and the permanence in the political system is the officials. Politicians come and go, we get voted in, we get voted out. A lot of the power and knowledge rests with the officials. And I have to say that what you've come up against seems to be that. And I don't doubt that any of my colleagues who have held office will have come up at that at council level and at central level. And it's a dearth of democracy. And if the community have been consulted, the community have expressed a view, and that's a viable view and it's not been put into place, then that's not democratic. That's simply not very democratic. We have to be creative. We're going to need to look at different ways. I was at Hustings in Lochaber last night where we were asked, should there be a specialist autistic centre? And all other people went, yes, should be a specialist one in Lochaber. So is there resilience for that? Sometimes we have to be creative about looking at ways. I don't want anyone to be de-skilled. The opportunity for paramedics, the opportunity for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service to have some role in support. We need to look at ensuring that there isn't the much used phrase postcode lottery, and that people... I've been at meetings, as colleagues will have, where people have said, oh, I have to take 2 buses in the city to get that service. And the first thing I say is, oh, you've got 2 buses, that's good. You know? It would be nice to have a bus, never mind 2 buses to get the service. And I chaired a meeting in the Parliament about chronic pain, and it's a very, very important issue. And I listened to people for a considerable length of time, and I said the challenge I have and I'm dealing with is that there are areas where there's no GP to even refer someone on to chronic pain. So we need to look at solving this issue. There's work being done through UHI, there's work being done with NHS Highland about trying to find out what happens elsewhere. The experience, for instance, in Australia, it maybe seemed dramatic now back in Australia. We must be creative, but we can't have a situation where anyone is subject to you don't pay less tax in law as a result of a reduced ambulance provision. Why should I have a reduced ambulance provision? I think we need to get to the bottom of this. The final thing I'll say, Chair, is that I had a constituent got in touch with me to say that there had been difficulty getting his mother returned from the hospital in Inverness to somewhere in the Highlands. But he was told that if they paid for a private ambulance, that she could get back. And they paid for a private ambulance, and it cost several £100, and the private ambulance was the Scottish Ambulance Service. Absolutely shocking disgrace. I raised that about how they raised the revenue, and I have to say that that money was reimbursed. Now we need to, if there's any bean counters, and there are no offence, but we need to get things sorted and realise we're dealing first and foremost with people. So I'm deeply sorry that you've had these frustrations. I know that it's not due to the lack of effort on the part of the community or our elected representatives. Stay at it. If by chance I'm re-elected, then I'll be very happy with your assistance.
Thank you, Joanne. Anyone else want to comment about Alan?
Thank you. I mean, the vision I have for this constituency is thriving local communities. The health is clearly absolutely vital to us all, and for communities to thrive, we clearly need a good, reliable health service. Now, I think that there's two issues at stake here. One is the number of GPs, and two is the ambulance service. All of rural Scotland has been suffering in recent years, along with Mull, a lack of GPs. And if things aren't done quickly, that crisis is only going to get worse. But so many of Scotland's GPs are in their 50s or early 60s and are obviously going to retire in the foreseeable future, and we're simply not training enough replacements. So the next Scottish Government has to make a much bigger investment into training GPs and also to make rural practice much more attractive, so to get the GPs out into rural areas. That's the GP side of the question. In terms of the ambulance side of the question, I mean, I'm just horrified at what I've heard, because, I mean, the case that Billy presented was clearly impressive, and you quite clearly have a cast iron case. Now, what has happened here with ministers and civil servants is, I'm afraid, all too familiar. That ministers mean well, but they're very busy. As soon as a minister leaves a meeting, he or she issues some instructions to the civil service, but then rushes into another completely different meeting and often never has the time to follow it up. So we've all seen Yes Minister, which is actually reality, and the civil servants are there permanently, they have the time. The danger is that they win. And the question is, how do we win this argument over the civil service? Well, the answer is that whoever is elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament in the next Parliament has to simply keep harrying the minister. And I have plenty of experience at harrying ministers. There's plenty of techniques that you can follow. You table questions in Parliament, oral questions that the minister has to answer in the Parliament, or keep tabling written questions, keep restating the case. Get the minister hauled before a committee, speak to the chair of the Health Committee, and persuade the chair of the Health Committee of the quality of the case, and get the minister brought before the Health Committee. MSPs can also apply for what's called members' debates on any topic they choose. That means that the MSP gets the chance to go along and state the case on behalf of the local community, and the minister has to come in Parliament and answer it. That means the minister has to ask the civil service for a brief, and that forces the minister to think about the issue, forces the civil servants that their case can come out into the open. Now, one case that I can mention is, this is going back about 10 years, when there was a problem about the VAT regulations that threatened to stop the new swimming pool here going ahead. And working with the local community, I got all the facts, applied for a members' debate in the House of Commons. Don Primarola, who was then one of the secretaries to the Treasury, a minister, had to reply to the debate. And that meant you had to get a briefing from ministers, and that forced a lot of issues out into the open that hadn't been in the open. And as a result, following on from that debate, we got rules changed. So those are the techniques that a member of Parliament, or a member of the Scottish Parliament can follow. And particularly getting a members' debate on the subject, because I've had members' debate on the subject where the minister has come along and read out the civil service brief, but then has said quietly to me afterwards, I think that I'm not very happy with what's going on, just give me some time to get this sorted out. So I think it's a case of the Minister's busy, you have to get the attention of the Minister onto our issue. Clearly we have a cast iron case, and if you elect me, I will harry the Minister until we get to the right answer.
Thank you, Alan. I'll ask Michael Russell now, because Michael's been heavily involved with the community on this issue. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks very much, Mayor Jean. I mean, the very simple answer to what Billy has asked, what can be done, is to continue to argue the case very vigorously with the Minister and with the ambulance service. The ambulance service are the villains of the piece in here. I mean, I have been at all 3 ministerial meetings. We have had a debate in the Parliament. We have had an endless succession of questions asked. And indeed, the last meeting we had on the 16th of March with Shona Robertson, she accepted that it was exceptionally bad practice to have decided, for the Scottish Ambulance Service, to have decided on an option that wasn't in the options appraisal. And she made that absolutely clear, and it is an extraordinary thing for them to have done. But the Scottish Ambulance Service appear to be a law unto themselves presently, and that has to change. That has to be broken, frankly. And that's what the task now is. I have an outstanding piece of correspondence with the Minister, which responds to, and I think the original letter was published in Mull, was it not? Yeah, the original letter that we had from the Minister, or my response to it. There was a letter from the Minister after asking, recognising that the relationship had broken down between the community and the ambulance service particularly, and the wider health provision, and asking for work to be done to restore that. But the vehicle that the civil servants suggest is not a suitable vehicle. That is the locality planning group, which will only has a representative from Craignure on it, and one from Mull. Yeah, that's right. So, this has been a long fight. It's going to continue to be a fight. It's got to be won because, as Mayor Jean has said, that what happened yesterday in terms of the 2999 calls at the same time is not unique. And the statistics that the ambulance service are using are inaccurate. They're wrong. I don't actually precisely know why the ambulance service has done themselves into deep with this. It may be money, but the money situation is now not the biggest issue. I think this could be resolved by the appointment of an additional technician. I mean, we are now at the stage, because there has been progress in the last 2 years, we're now at the stage where the appointment of an additional technician will resolve this issue. So what we have to do is to keep pressing for that solution to be put in place. After a meeting in this hall, I took a compromise solution to the Minister that involved that. That's not yet been accepted, but my view is that's what will have to be accepted. And after the election, and unfortunately elections give a hiatus in these things, after the election I will be going back to seek answers from my most recent correspondence, arguing again for the compromise position, making sure that the debate is not closed down and concluded. My complaint about NHS Highland, I think the community complaint is somewhat different. It has involved largely unelected people. I think there's a real problem in health boards that have largely unelected members who appear to be unanswerable. And the establishment of the new integrated board has also created a situation where they just appear to be not focused on what change is. But the real issue is the Scottish Ambulance Service, and were I to be re-elected, I would continue to fight with the community as I have done for the last almost 2 years to make sure that we have an answer to this. I do feel that it's a very unfair burden on the voluntary members of the committee who've gone through this for the past 2 years. All I can say to them is what I said to them and you to Mary Jean in Edinburgh on the 16th of March. We have to finish this job, and I'm sorry it's fallen to you to do so, but we've got to finish this job.
I'm going to take the first written-in question, which is a question that I think someone mentioned, but it was about housing, and it's from Jodie MacLeod, and there are 2 questions. Opportunities to rent on the islands are hard to come by, and housing for sale on the open market is out with the reach of most young families and first-time buyers. 12% of the housing on Mull is second homes. How will you, if elected, and your party, ensure that island communities like Mull benefit from the new Rural Housing Fund to help provide more affordable housing for rent and sale, and to help retain and attract young people? Now, I don't know, maybe 2 of you want to comment on this, or if you wanted to read the second question and comment on both questions at once. Okay. I'll just I'll read the second question then. The Rural Home Ownership Grant, which no longer exists, helped to build 57 rural homes per year between 1991 and 2005, whereas the Rural Open Market Shared Equity Scheme provided 32 homes per year between 2008 and 2014. Where does your party stand on self-build, and what measures will you be taking to help individuals build their own homes? Michael?
Can I just touch on self-build? Can people hear me? Yeah. Can I just touch on self-build? There is a new scheme that has just started in the Highlands, a new self-build scheme supported by the Scottish Government. I think it's a Highland small housing group that are doing it, but it's an experiment. It's a pilot scheme. And what it does is it gives money up to £150,000 to close the gap on funding, and that is repaid if and when a mortgage can be obtained on the property, because one of the big difficulties in self-building is getting a mortgage at the early stage. That is a pilot scheme, but I have specifically asked in recent weeks what will happen to the pilot scheme, and providing it works, providing it's taken up, then there is a guarantee it will be extended to other parts of Scotland. And the obvious place to extend it to is, because we can see the Highlands where it's operating, is to extend it to Argyll. So I think there is the likelihood that there will be a new self-build scheme in place here, I would hope, next year. The Rural Housing Grant is a new fund which the Minister announced last month, in March. It's got an allocation of money each year. I think there's already an application from Mull for at least a part of the money for Overferry, and I think it's very important that Mull applies again and again for small developments. The final thing is that ACCA and Fine Homes have been very successful in recent years in getting comparatively small amounts to build small numbers of houses in rural villages. I was at the opening of 2 houses in Taydalach 3 weeks ago. So I want to see more of that. And it's the Scottish Government that's created the circumstances where you can get small amounts of public housing in small villages. And that makes the biggest difference, as everybody knows. If you can get 2 families with children into a rural village, you're actually going to revolutionise those villages. So all those things have been happening, and bit by bit, they're making progress.
Thank you, Michael. Donald?
Yeah, in terms of the Rural Housing Fund, I mean, we were very pleased to see that introduced, and we welcome that. It was actually a policy that was first called for by the Scottish Conservatives Rural Commission, which it set up a few years ago. And we will ensure that it provides a sustained level of funding. And it goes back, we will hold the SNP to account on that. In terms of general self-build, I think there are a number of possibilities that could be used. I think we should try and speed the planning process up. I think we should look at brownfield land, trying to compile registers of that, so that kind of land can be used for more self-build. And I think we also need to look at sort of creating service plots with infrastructure that's already in, so that can be used by people who want to self-build.
Thank you very much. John, do you want to say something on this?
Thank you, yes. Well, first and foremost, housing is a human right, and it's a human right it's not being afforded to every citizen in the Highlands and Islands. In Highlands Council area alone, there's 11,000 folk on the waiting list, and that's a damning indictment. And one of the issues is land availability. So I mentioned in the opening that we would seek to have councils buy at existing use value, rather than people hoard land to speculate. We would have it at existing use value. That was possible in Scotland up until 1959. It's still possible in Germany. We'd also want to make greater use of the empty homes, of 27,000 empty homes. There's 11,000 acres of derelict and vacant land, and we would make sure that people paid tax on that. And if they didn't, then that's going to make more land available. I think specifically for Mull, I think people will be interested in our proposal that using a property as a second home should require planning permission. Now, that would put a lot of, you might imagine, interest into the local authorities. The local authorities are the statutory providers of housing in the Argyll area, and that is ceded to the housing associations who, as Mike says, are doing very fine work. But the local authority has an obligation to do a housing needs analysis, and any analysis of a rural area would say insufficient land for housing. And of course, it's not housing itself. We need to, as Mike says, you know, I give the example of the south side of Inverness used to be fine agricultural land, there's now thousands of soulless houses. Rather than 200 more houses built there, I feel that the Scottish Government planned to sell to developers breaching their own guidelines, that a community campaign successfully overturned. If 20 communities had 10 houses built, and some of them were occupied, then not only would the local school be sustained, the post office, the pub, community transport. So we need, and Dawn said this right at the outset, we need to repopulate. We didn't used to, Highlands didn't used to have lots of empty lands, it had lands full of people. So I think there are a lot of issues that overlap there, but it is not having people to profit from having land. And if we get this right over a longer period, property prices will come down. Because renting is another issue in the Highlands. It's a challenge because of tourism. There are some areas where there's an all-year-round tourist trade. There's other areas where you'll be welcome between October and then they want to throw you out come Easter time. So there are a lot of things. It's a housing need analysis and getting communities playing an active part in it.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Okay, can I ask now, are there any questions from the... Oh, sorry, Mick, sorry.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Well, the Labour Party in Scotland has a policy which will be revealed in detail in its forthcoming manifesto launch of assisting people who are first-time buyers by finding their deposit for them. So we will be pursuing that. In relationship to the 12% of holiday homes on this island, it would be really useful, would it not, if a number of those were made available on the open market rather than be maintained as holiday homes. I think there is a couple of things that the council could do. It may be that some of it is doing already. One is that holiday homes used to get a reduction in rates. I think councils have the power to impose full rates on those properties. The second thing is that quite a lot of holiday home owners set their second home up as a business. And if they do that, potentially they can qualify for business rate relief and not pay any rates on the property because they say, we're running it as a business. Well, my view, because I helped to run a B&B in Blairmore near Dunoon, and we get some reduction in our rates because we have a business there, that where you have got a property that is solely being used for rental purposes, it ought not to be designated as a business. That would then increase the costs for those who've got second holiday homes that are trying to run it as a business or whatever, and it would mean hopefully that more of them would come onto the market, and people buying property for the first time on Mull would be able to get their deposit because you will of course have elected a Labour government in Scotland. Or maybe the SNP would have accepted our policy.
Thank you, Mick. Alan?
It's clearly very difficult for young people to get started on the housing ladder these days. It's also clear that you can't have vibrant communities without housing for young people. I welcome the two schemes that Mike mentioned that the Scottish Government has started and the funding that will be available for those schemes over the next few years. If you elect me as your MSP, I would want to work with the local community and with the council and with the housing associations to make sure that as much money for that comes to Mull as we need, because both housing for rent and also individuals being able to build their own houses clearly have important parts to play in the housing mix. So I'll certainly work with the local community to make the case and get money for Mull from these schemes.
Thank you, Alan. Now can I ask for any questions from the floor, please? Brian Smith, thanks to everybody.
Right. I'm going to change tact completely here, folks. I'm going to ask about the devolution of the Crown Estate. It doesn't matter, Chris, I'll shout. It's okay, the devolution of the Crown Estate. which we all know is quite divisive in some respects to some people, and other people actually recognise that there's a lot of value come to this community through Tobermory Harbour Association, and also through other funds that have gone out to build marinas and pontoons in the area for water sports, float and things like that. But what does the committee think, as it's devolved to Scotland, would be a new way to manage the Crown Estate? I'm interested in your views on what would be a new way to manage the Crown Estate as it's devolved to Scotland.
Is this directed at all the committee, Ryan, or anyone in particular?
I'm fairly sure of Mike's views, but if you want to add something at the end, I would very much like to hear from others, actually.
Okay, does anyone want to take the Crown Estate question? John?
Well, of course, we're not getting all the Crown Estate. We're not getting Craignure Shopping Centre in Edinburgh at a significant loss. And we must ask ourselves what the purpose of it all is. You know, it's been very challenging. I've dealt with the Crown Estate in relation to an issue in the Murray Coast and found it very challenging. I think the broader issue is we need to discuss issues around common good as well, the whole philosophy of what the purpose of land is and who the beneficiaries should be. You know, and this is definitely going to offend Donald around here, definitely. But, you know, as I need to find that many people have difficulty grasping the concept that anyone, even Cameron or Hill, can own an idea or a salmon. And we just need to have a totally different attitude. And I think there are initiatives, the Community Empowerment Bill, which the Scottish Government put through as well, and the discussions that are ongoing about the islands authorities, the very welcome discussions that Cosla had about taking a different approach to things. And it's certainly the Scottish Green Party's view that the community should be playing a greater role in everything, from housing to energy generation. And indeed, in that process, bypassing the centre and bypassing the big six energy companies. So I think there's a lot of discussion to be had. We've not got the whole devolution of it yet, and of course there's huge tracts of Oxford Street. And we must ask who the beneficiary of that. We know that what's it called again? We know the Windsor family get is 15% of the profits of the Crown Estate. So it'd be very good if we could pay their staff a living wage. That would be a start from that. I think there are a whole lot of issues coming up with it. Our environment is very important, and I think it should be a common asset for everyone.
Thank you, John. I'll ask Michael now to add his comments to it.
Brian, you've been involved in these discussions, I know, on a national basis, but I think the views of what will happen have changed. There are three parties on this platform who have supported the devolution of the powers of the Crown Estate, the Scottish Parliament, Labour, Liberal and the SNP. When Liberals went into power with the Tories, the Coastal Communities Fund was set up. And that took the money, or some of the money, and gave it out on a charitable basis, but it didn't give any democratic control of the resource. What is now being proposed is that the Crown Estate would be, and that's essentially the funding of the property, would be devolved to the Scottish Parliament. Some things won't be devolved. John's right to say the shopping, one of the big shopping centres in Edinburgh won't be devolved because of a bit of sleight of hand. But the important thing is that the resources, the coastal resources, will come. But actually this has opened up a very interesting discussion and debate about how these resources should be managed. Because, for example, the Tobermory Harbour Association has been working constructively with the Crown Estate staff in Scotland about how they would and how you would be able to run essentially the area of ground, the foreshore and the harbour that the Crown Estate has the right to. So where there is good local management available for those resources, for harbours, for foreshore, whatever, that should go as locally as possible. That's the first thing. But that doesn't exist everywhere. So then the question is, how should the rest of it be managed? And I have to say, and it won't be a surprise to people in this room, Mary Jean, I'm sure you won't be offended by this, is I'm not wildly enthusiastic about Argyll and Bute Council taking all that resource and managing it, because I don't think it would work particularly well. So how do we get that operating? I think the answer is that the resources, that's the money that comes from it, should be locally available. So councils should be able to access the money that comes from the Crown Estate resources and use it particularly for their coastal areas. Orkney and Shetland are very strong on this. I think that will happen around the islands of Argyll. But the present management structure of the Crown Estate in Edinburgh and the staff who are often very high quality, particularly for agriculture and for the coastal management, should remain as a unit and be operating and helping to administer that jointly with local authorities and the Scottish Government, except where there's a possibility or the likelihood of good local management. And that's devolution in practice, essentially. It's what's called subsidiarity, when a power can be exercised at the lowest possible level it should be. So it's slightly more complicated than anybody thought it was going to be to start with. But it'll give power in places like Tobermory to the Harbour Association. Other harbours associations are being set up, and that will become more common. The money will come locally, so it'll be used here. But in actual fact, the good management the Crown Estate often does, in terms of some assets, will be retained, and that management team will be retained. And I think that's likely to be what happens. There is no final decision yet, because devolution hasn't taken place, and that's for the next Parliament to decide. But having been part of those discussions over the last 2 years, as you have been, Brian, over the last year, I think that's where it is going, and I think that will bring actual benefit to Mull, both in terms of how that power is exercised in Tobermory, and how the resources will be made available to the community.
Thank you, Mick. Can we, Alan, do you want to say something? I'm trying not to let everybody make a comment about every question here.
Okay, I'll keep it short. And I agree with Mike. I was on the Scottish Affairs Select Committee when we had the inquiry into Craignure Estate, and I know Brian and the Tobermory Harbour Association were one of the groups that responded, and for which we were very pleased. It's important that local communities benefit. We cannot have a one-size-fits-all, so I think there should be discussion with all the coastal communities in Scotland, and we choose the model of devolution that would benefit each particular community.
Thank you, Alan. Do we have any more questions from the floor? Thank you, sir.
I live in a private cottage, on a private estate, and I've just signed a new lease. Not extraordinary, it's the same as many people, leases that many people have. I've lived in a cottage for 20 years, paying rent, and my lease says that my landlord can evict me at 8 weeks' notice. No reason to be given, just if they want my house for other purposes, I can be out. What would you candidates do to introduce some kind of protection for me? Not that I'm getting evicted, and that my landlord doesn't intend to evict me, but they could, if they so wish. And I would have no help whatsoever. I would be out, simple as that, after 20 years, with no protection at all.
Does anyone want to take that question? Mike, Russell?
There will be a rural housing bill in the next Parliament if there's an SNP government. There's already a commitment to a rural housing bill. That strikes me as something that needs to be in the rural housing bill to give security of tenure over a lengthy period. Now, there's a sort of parallel with the land reform bill and the proposal that I put forward, which wasn't accepted, that if you had had a tenancy of a farm for more than 50 years, you should be entitled to buy it. And that right to buy was not accepted by the Scottish Government, but I think it will come back. The land reform bill did not deal with rural housing because it was too big an area to deal with. But there was a commitment made at the end of the process that the rural housing bill will come forward. So that's got to be in it. If you give me your details tonight, I think I would want to know a bit more about your own circumstances and what I should say here. But I think that's precisely the type of thing that's got to be in it. There also has to be protection in terms of farmhouses for tenant farmers. Tenant farming houses are presently excluded from housing standards, which actually means that a tenant farmer can live in very poor conditions but not be able to improve the house, sometimes because of the type of tenancy that he's in. And there is also the question of land for rural housing, which is a huge issue, and the value of land being so high, it is very difficult to get land for rural housing. And that's an issue that the bill will have to address too. But security of tenure, after a period of time is definitely required. And you have to have it, so the rural housing bill has to do that.
Thank you, Mike. John, you want to comment?
I'll comment quickly, thanks, Chair, because Mike's covered a lot of it there. There is some unfinished business, and Mike's touched on it. It's unfortunate because its proposal didn't go through there. But the Scottish Green Party are very keen that people understand that it's because of the way the housing market is framed that renting is the only option for many people. There's a dearth of social housing, and we need to alter that balance. We want rent controls put in place, and I'm disappointed the Scottish Government didn't pick up on that one. And to pick up on the rent reflecting the issues, I mean, it's an utter disgrace that all houses don't have to reach the Scottish Housing Quality Standard, or it's been recently updated to another rate. So, it is unfinished business, and I look forward to it being picked up again at Holyrood.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Murray Finch for his question, please.
Thank you. The changes made by the UK government to the incentives for renewable energy generation have seriously damaged the prospects for Scottish communities to generate their own power and to produce funds for solving local problems with local solutions. Please, can you give your own views and the policy of your party on how the next Scottish Government should support community-owned renewable energy projects?
Okay, I think Donald's ready to go on that one. Thanks, Murray.
Thanks, Murray. First, I should say I've got first-hand experience of small-scale community ownership, particularly hydro schemes in Lochaber. I know they extend to Malvern, Ardnamurchan, etc. And those community interests range from simply taking community benefit to an equity stake to full ownership. And in terms of what the UK government did, I wouldn't accept that they are against community renewables. In terms of what they did in relation to wind farms, they ended the ROC subsidy a year early. And in terms of the feed-in tariff for smaller scale renewables, they decreased the support that was available. They didn't stop the support, and they reintroduced pre-accreditation and have threatened to take it away, which was very important, especially for hydro schemes when you need that two-year build period. And in terms of hydro, I don't think the challenge is actually really funding or even planning. The challenge is grid connection. That's what I think stops most hydro schemes in the West Highlands at least, or at least delays them. So I accept that support has been decreased, partly because the feed-in tariff was so successful. There were so many applications, of so much money was spent that it exceeded expectations. But the reason why the bill had to be cut down was it was getting out of control. And the people that were paying were you and me, those of us, all of us, with an electricity bill. Because the electricity bills were going to pay for this tariff. So in order to keep energy bills down, something had to be done. I think there is still potential for community renewables. I think they will still have a very important role to play in providing our energy needs, and I'm confident that new schemes will go ahead. I don't think in the heyday of hydro generation every scheme will go ahead, but I'm confident that some schemes will go ahead, and innovative funding can still be found. There are a lot of funders still out there who are keen to develop, and the Green Investment Bank is still, is in fact, I think, expanding. So I think that there is a future, and I hope that in the next Scottish Parliament I can be elected and play a role in forging that future.
Thank you, Donald. Can I ask Alan Reid now to comment?
Thank Murray for his question. His first part of his question is what do we think of the changes made by the UK government? I am opposed to these changes. This was something that the Tories would like to have done in the last Parliament, but the Liberal Democrat part of the coalition wouldn't allow them. That's because we believe that in order to stop climate change, we have to get to a situation in Scotland where we're capable of generating 100% of our energy from renewables. That a strong policy on renewables was part of the policy of the coalition government. But unfortunately now that the Tories are in power on their own, they have made these cuts, which I'm opposed to. Murray and I worked very closely together during the last Parliament, because to allow the Mull hydro scheme to go ahead with the feed-in tariff that it's got, it actually needed a change in the law, and I was grateful for all the help that Murray gave to me in order to bring about that change in the law, and it was a case of Murray and I working together over a long period of time, and we managed to persuade the government to make a change in the law for Garmany Hydro. And I worked with Murray on that because renewables are so important, and the government, the coalition government, agreed. So I'm very disappointed at the change. Now, the electricity market is a matter that's reserved to the UK government, so the Scottish Parliament cannot put those subsidies back in. But what the Scottish government can do using its powers is help community renewable schemes, and certainly as you remember the Scottish Parliament, I would certainly be working with any community that wanted to develop the renewable scheme. There's the CARES scheme, that's the Community Renewable Energy Scheme, which can give help and advice, it can give start-up grants, it can give pre-planning loans, and that is something where the Scottish Government can help, and I certainly want the Scottish Government to give all the help that it can.
Thank you, Alan. And I'll now ask Mike Russell to comment.
You asked specifically about community generation. I declare an interest. I own part of a share in the Garmany scheme, so anything I say is totally self-interested in that regard. In 2013, the Scottish Government set a target of 500 megawatts of community energy generation. In 2016, we reached 508 megawatts. So that had been a success. But what does imperil that success is precisely what you're saying. There is at least a confusion now in the situation. And with the reduction that's come from Westminster, I've had representations from quite a number of rural energy community schemes saying, are we going to get in? Are we going to be able to build it? Will we actually qualify for what we need to make this happen? And although there is the CARES scheme, which is the Community and Renewable Energy Scheme, which helps, is administered by Local Energy Scotland, and it helps to make sure that projects go forward, including funding, planning, mentoring. Although there is money from the Green Investment Bank through the Renewable Energy Investment Fund, although there's also the Local Energy Challenge Fund, which is £20 million to help innovation, the confusion in the system is one of the things that's slowing it down. I mean, this growth to 508 megawatts is now really slowing. So you've got to take that confusion out, and the way to take that confusion out is to get all the energy powers into the Scottish Parliament. Devolving all the energy powers then means you have a consistent policy. You know what you're going to encourage. If you're going to encourage wind, if you're going to encourage hydro, if you're going to encourage solar, then you've got a single policy that does that. And if you're going to encourage community generation, then that fits in as part of that policy. So although I'm absolutely certain the SNP and government will continue with CARES, it will continue with the Local Energy Fund, it will continue to encourage renewables and community generation, it would be better, and I would say that, but it would be better to have all those powers in the Scottish Parliament, because that's where we can actually have a clarity about how we're going to deliver energy policy. And the important thing about that is that energy policy, when it's influencing south of the border particularly, is investing in many of the wrong things. This idea that to reduce bills we have to cut renewables, that's actually wrong. To reduce bills we have to regulate the market more strongly, because reducing bills, higher bills come from monopoly situations, and if you have greater diversity, you will reduce bills. The next circumstance is get the energy policy and the right to operate energy policy into the Scottish Parliament, and community renewables, amongst other things, will flourish.
Thank you, Michael. Was that Mike?
Thank you. I'm in favour of tidal, wave, hydro and other forms of renewable energy. I'm not actually in favour of increasing the number of wind farms because I've seen too many of them, and I really do think that, unfortunately, the wind is not blowing. You need to get the base load from somewhere else. As it happens, I'm quite lucky because last year I was able to introduce a biomass system into the property where I live, and I get a grant from Ofgem, from central government, which helps pay for that on an ongoing basis. But the trouble is, that money comes from ordinary people's bills, because they have a carbon tax allocation on top of their bill. And what it means is that if you can afford the capital outlay for the equipment, you then get the grant. Okay, the government has now stopped that. I mean, I managed to get in before they stopped it. But it does seem to me that we ought to be looking at how we can establish effective community and district-wide schemes using renewable energy and using hydro electricity on a mini scale. But of course, the major problem we are faced at the moment is that energy policy is affected by the price of oil. And all of these schemes, some of which were going to stack up financially, have been affected because the Saudis are pumping out oil as if there's no tomorrow, and they're doing that for their own political reasons. They want to undermine the potential fracking industry in the US of A, and they know on top of that, that if they pump out oil at the rate they are doing, that it will affect the balance of payments for the Russian state and probably knock the legs from under Venezuela. So that they're actually affecting the fracking industry in the US, but they're no doubt helping US foreign policy. But what that means on a global scale, it's another case of globalisation, is that you can't work out effective local community schemes that are going to stack up. That's the problem we've got. But I think that and I know that Mull has a reputation for community entrepreneurship, that we ought to be looking at that, because I do know that certainly on the hydro side, there are some small schemes, as a farm near where I live, which is getting £100,000 a year back. Yes, indeed. Okay. Back, and that ought to be really a community-related initiative.
Thank you very much. Can I ask David Paul? Oh, sorry, John. He's the only one that hasn't commented. After this question, I think I'll just ask two candidates to comment on every question, because there's still a lot to get through, and we've only got an hour left, so thank you.
I'll be with you, Chair. I think it's important because it touches on a number of issues, and that is that clearly we can't go on doing things that we were. The rehab and the infrastructures we mentioned, that's correct, as I understand. It's a limitation around to alcohol that precludes exporting. I certainly would want to see a situation where we could bypass the 6 large companies. I think there's been initiatives after I've been in fact the West Highland Housing Association been involved in the housing associations coming together to buy energy and being energy providers. That's another way of bypassing them. Because you can't, Mick's right about what he says about the Scottish, you can't dip in and out the market. That's the reality of it. The Scottish Green Party would introduce a Scottish renewable energy bond, but Mike's entirely right too, and that is that you can't have bits of this responsibility. The power for energy should be devolved. Donald didn't suggest if it was a community nuclear scheme we might get support. But of course, that's all the eggs in the basket of the UK government. Sorry?
A 4 times the price.
Yes, but it's, it will need to be a mix, but that mix has to be renewables.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, can I ask David Pollard for his question, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're all aware of the damaging cuts to services that have had to be imposed by Holyrood Council. And the reason seems to be that, on the one hand, the Scottish Government's cut the grant, and on the other hand, the Scottish Government exempted the Council from increasing the council tax. So, my first question is, what do members of the panel think about further devolution to council with more power? And then the second question is related to community councils. On the community council on Mull, we are very aware there are lots of little jobs that need doing that we could get done cheaper if we had the power and the bit of budget to do it. So what about devolution all the way down to community council?
Thank you, David. Does anyone want to take that question? Okay, Mike.
The Alasdair Council is actually better funded per head than any other member of local authority, with the exception of the island authorities. So your supposition is incorrect, I'm afraid. That's not to say that it doesn't have unique challenges, and one of those unique challenges is depopulation, and it's not doing very much to assist that. Though the new report by Nick Ferguson, which they've commissioned, is very helpful, I've been involved in recent weeks in helping the Council, as Mayor Jean knows, to meet with the Leader and Chief Executive. I've arranged them to meet with John Swinney and myself to look at a new initiative, a rural regeneration initiative, based on the issue of depopulation and connectivity, and we're making progress with that. So, our Gallowbutte Council, with of course the Liberal Democrats in the Council administration, need to manage their affairs better. They're a badly managed council, they're one of the worst managed councils in Scotland. But they're also getting help from the Scottish Government. But I'm in favour of more radical change to local government than you suggest. I think that we need to bring power much closer to people. I think it's one of the major benefits of the referendum process, where we actually got an energy and an enthusiasm for involvement in decision making. So I'd like to see a very much more local decision making in Scotland. I think we've also persuaded our Gallowbutte Council recently, John Swinney and myself, to look at the establishment of clusters of schools in which decision making is made, including budgetary decision making, is made in those school clusters. Now I think we can extend that to other decision making made more locally with the involvement of local elected representatives. Whether that's on the basis of community councils or whether it's on the basis of a slightly larger or different unit, I think that needs to be discussed. But I'm certainly in favour of change, and I don't think what we have at the moment in our Gallowbutte is good local government. That's why I wouldn't empower it any further. I'd empower communities and people living in communities.
Thank you, Mike. I think Mick will have you, and that will be...
Yeah, as it happens, I did actually stand to be a member of our Gallowbutte Council, and unfortunately I wasn't elected at the last occasion, which is, I think, a great pity. But nonetheless, the point is that I do think it's a bit rich to say that our Gallowbutte Council has not been properly led, when, if I recollect, initially it was led by a member of the SNP.
But not now.
Not now. In fact, I think it was led by 3 members of the SNP because they kept chopping and changing. So let's be clear about it. When the SNP had the opportunity, they fluffed it. And now we've got, I think, a leadership which does need changing. And I've already said in other meetings that I would be interested in developing a progressive alliance with the SNP, and maybe with Alan Reid, but not the Lib Dems that are already there, to see if we can bring about some effective change next year. Now, the other thing which I think is terribly important is about community councils. Because I think, because community councils are elected, they should be supported. And I think we should discuss with the community councils what can be devolved to community councils. Because I agree with the notion of subsidiarity, and we ought to be giving community councils greater power. I think they'd be taken much more seriously by communities if they had more power, rather than they was just simply representational bodies and don't have any budget to speak of to spend on local activities.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question I'm going to allocate to 2 of the members to my left. How can you, as our MSP, support access to the extra childcare that the Scottish Government has committed to in absence of any registered childcare facility on the island, out with the limited resources of the preschool units? Alan, could I ask you to that question, please?
Yes, I think this is an example where the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. There's no point in a government or a parliament legislating for something to happen if the practicalities on the ground mean that it doesn't happen everywhere. So clearly in rural communities, finding the companies available to provide the childcare can often pose difficulties. So I would want to work with the local community and with the government of whichever complexion it is to make sure that the funding and the support does come to local communities, so that when a pledge is given for universal childcare, that it actually applies to every community in Scotland. That may mean that the Scottish Government spending more money in some remote communities in order to make that happen, but it certainly has to happen, and because of the pledge of universality is given, it has to happen to apply to every parent, to every child. So it's a case of working with the community to find a solution that best meets the needs of that particular local community.
I think the question is, Alan, that the community have been working on this, and they've got the money, but there are no childcare facilities on the island, and it's how do we encourage people to do that? Because the girls have been trying for a good 2 years now, and they've got the money. Money for this occasion is not a problem. It's the space and the resources and the staff to do it. That's always a problem on Mull when we don't have them. So that was the question. And the second part of the question is, how do you plan to encourage and support young, economically active families to move to the island when house prices are too high to buy? There aren't enough private houses to rent, and there are very limited childcare facilities on the island. So does one of you gentlemen at the end want to take that?
I can be very brief, and then John can have. I mean, I've spoken already about housing, etc. I think, as Scottish Conservatives, what we want is a more flexible system of childcare, and one that is responsive to the demands of parents. How that system is put in place, there are all sorts of ways to do that, but I think it has to be more flexible. And we're also in favour of greater support for earlier years, so 1 and 2 year old childcare, for there to be expansion there. I'll pass it to John.
Well, I think there's a real challenge. Some of us have been about a while, will recall, when political parties were bidding over how much gym or PE kids could get. And it was going to be taken up a greater part of the week when that bidding war took place at one time. And I think we're in a similar situation with childcare. And the thing I want to say, there are people who don't want their children, and I'll use the term institutionalised very early. They want to have their children at home. And it's Don's entirely right about flexibility. But does that mean flexibility if people work shifts? I think that there are a lot of well-meaning decisions that are put in place centrally where there are challenges. The provision of school meals is another one where the infrastructure wasn't there to provide that. So it does come back to the previous question in many respects, and that is, if we want Nordic style of public services, then we're going to have to pay for them. And we're going to have to pay for them by having people paying more locally, and people more locally deciding what they want to pay. So again, I would ask that you look at my colleagues' proposals regarding raising funds for local government, because a lot of them are conditional and they're still determining what local government will spend them on. So, can I say, as a former group leader in Highland Council that was in administration, Highland Council is no more local government than Belgium having a local government, because Highland Council is the size of Belgium and is the size of Wales. So when you have a councillor getting in their car in MICT to deliberate on a planning application that you can just see over the water, that's not local government. So we need to get real meaningful local government. Well, people will find ways around, but one size doesn't fit all. We need flexibility, but that needs to be paid for. And people like me should be paying a lot more for it.
Thank you, John. Okay, is Gillian Cummins in the audience tonight? No. Okay, Gillian sent a question in. Now, bear with me as I read it. Don't all rush to put your hands up to answer it. According to independent analysis by 2 internationally recognised scientific organisations, i.e. 1, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and 2, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Earth's global temperature in February 2016 was the most abnormally warm on record. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 represents far-reaching, radical measures, and 1 represents lip service and greenwash, where would you place the policies and priorities of your party in preventing climate catastrophe? And I think we will go to Mick Rice for this one. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to give it a 7 because I'm not going to lie to you and say it's the most important thing ever, but I do think it does need to be addressed and we need to examine it. I think there are other things that we need to resolve in the immediate term, but certainly in the medium term we need to do something about it. So I would give it a 7.
Thank you. Mr Russell, would you like to comment on it?
Yeah, I'll give the SNP in government an 8 to 8.5 because there's still work to do, but they've started well. I was an environment minister. I'm still a member of the Rural Affairs and Climate Change Committee, and I think there are two problems, major problems, that confront us in Scotland. One is that we need leadership to actually achieve what we have committed ourselves to. We've got very ambitious climate change targets in Scotland, and we've come very close to meeting them every year, but we haven't met them. We haven't met them partly because the goalposts changed, because the method of calculating changed, but we also haven't met them, and I've said this before, I've said it in the Rural Affairs Committee legacy session, but I'm happy to say it publicly here. We need to focus in government and in the Parliament on the people who are going to insist that these changes are delivered. And by that I mean, in the Parliament there are 12 committees, and only one of those committees has the word climate change in it, and that committee has no particular power or authority to say to the others, what are you doing? Because it's not just about one group of people saying we're the environmentalists, we're going to change. We've got to say, how does society change? And that's true in government too. There is also a cabinet subcommittee on climate change. We have a minister, Aileen McLeod, the environment minister, is climate change in her title. But we need to have, in my view, and John's heard me say this before, a cabinet minister whose job is to say the government must deliver, how are we going to deliver? Because there are some areas in which we're not delivering. We are delivering more and more in some parts of transportation. We are in energy. We're not delivering enough in housing. We're certainly not delivering enough in terms of the use of car transportation. So we have to deliver locally in Scotland, and to do that we need to emphasise the role of leadership and commitment to meet our targets. Now that won't solve the problem entirely. We're signed on to the international agreements. International agreements have been slow to come to. But I think that sense of urgency in Scotland, just as us setting ambitious targets in the climate change bill in 2009, 2008, 2009, setting those ambitious targets, 2009 actually, setting those ambitious targets then said something to the rest of the world, because we were one of the first countries to do so. I think imbuing this with more urgency, more leadership in government, more leadership in the Parliament, that message will communicate itself elsewhere, that others will have to do that as well, to make sure that all our policies are bent towards achieving it. Because if we don't do that, then the situation will become progressively more serious. It's not just that we've had some of the warmest times on record over the winter. There is a mass of cold water sitting in the Atlantic, which is colder now this spring than it has ever been before. And that will switch off the Gulf Stream if it stays in. And if that does happen, then we don't know what will happen in Scotland in terms of winter weather, but it could mean to have more of the wet winters and more of the very cold, wet summers and more of the very cold winters. So we have got to have an urgency and leadership, and I think 8.5 is good, but there's more to do.
Thank you. Alasdair, are there any questions?
Yes, we've got a question from the internet, which is, let's see.
Do you want a microphone?
No, it's all right. Can you hear me at the back? Okay. Well, thank you.
Question from the internet, which says, a social media user says, I'm keen to know what candidates would do to pressure a Gowland Butte Council to improve peer facilities at Iona, Finnie and Craignure.
So that question
Thank you.
was what a Gowland Butte Council would do to pressurise a Gowland Butte Council to improve the services
That's the one.
at Iona, Finnie
And Craignure.
and Craignure Piers. Okay, does anyone want on this side, John? Thank you.
Yeah. I've long had an interest in care, particularly court care for older people, and it's a very simple equation, and that is that we want to encourage people to stay in their houses first and foremost, that's important. If we provide sufficient care in people's houses, they're less likely to be the subject of emergency admission to hospital, and if they're the subject of an emergency admission to hospital,
Here facilities.
Yeah.
It's that makes it very muffled.
Yeah.
Here facilities. All right, well, let me put it
Peer facilities. No.
Well, I would
Be nice
hear about
about
peers. Can I tell you what can be done?
You're a pro.
Because every one of my colleagues to the right here are great proponents of dual and day 9. That's going to cost £3 billion. Every one of my colleagues on the right support, their party support, the building of a 1 mile stretch of road in Inverness going to cost £65 million. Now, these are two very modest examples of what could be done. Now, the Green Party, the Scottish Green Party, are not against expenditure on roads. We're against expenditure on new roads, and I'll give you an example for that. The next big thing is a dual carriageway between Inverness and Aberdeen to give them this triangle. Now, at the moment, it makes no sense to go from Inverness to Aberdeen by road. It's much better to go by train. If you upgrade the road, you'll have a thing called modal shift. People will come off the train and go onto the roads. Now, instead of building new roads that are going to take people away from public transport, if these vast sums of money were spent, then the peers, the care of peers, Iona, and everywhere else, and infrastructure, the rest can be thankful. The Akasheen, where climate change is affecting the roads, the 82 that's subject to landslide. But you can't have it always. You can't go around the country saying, we're going to get you quicker. And that 1 mile stretch of road, which I can be a real bore about, the statistics will show that sometimes that will take you 12 seconds quicker instead of going around a different route. Now that's an awful lot of money. So, politics is about priorities, and if the priorities are big, glamorous schemes that all my colleagues on the right support, then you're not going to have important local infrastructure being maintained.
Thank you, John. Does anyone else want to comment on the care of peers? Mick, thank you.
I know a little bit about this because I'm a leading member of the Dunoon-Gourock Ferry Action Group, and would you believe the Dunoon Pier is owned by Argyll and Bute Council, and we have a useless passenger-only service which uses Dunoon Pier, and the council gets the sum of £235,000 a year in total berthing charges, where it actually costs £650,000, or just over £600,000 a year, to berth those wee passenger-only boats. Which means that all of you are paying £5,000 a week as ratepayers to our Garland Council to subsidise the useless passenger-only service from Dunoon to Gourock. Now, the interesting thing is, when we've asked our Garland Council to sort it out, they refused. And when we said to them, there's a new tender, and we're looking to try and encourage a vehicle passenger service on the route, they said, well, we're going to charge them £3 million a year in passenger and vehicle berthing dues, which is 5 times the actual cost. So they clearly don't want it. They have, I think, got 29 ports under our Garland Council, and when we've pushed them on it, they've told us they're going to have a working party on it. They've been having a working party for 2.5 years, and they haven't resolved the issue. Now, my view is that they ought to be charging cost plus a reasonable rate of return for each port that is in operation, and if they need to subsidise ports, then that should be transparent. What's happened is they're hiding it all under the carpet, people don't know what's going on, and you have to use freedom of information to try and find out what they're up to. But anyway, you're paying £5,000 a week for a useless service down at Dunoon Harbour.
I think the question was, Mick, about Holyrood, Iona and Craignure.
Well, if you charge the proper rate at Dunoon, you get 1.5 million over the last 5 years.
Don't think Dunoon's an island.
No, which would make a difference to the family.
Anyway, moving swiftly on, does anyone else want to comment on the care of peers? Because I don't want to get started about peers, because there is a working party, but they haven't run out of drink yet, so that's why there's no conclusion. The next question is from Mary Gregg, and it is, introduction of RET will undoubtedly increase tourism to the island, but could also mean increased competition from mainland businesses. How do you plan, as a prospective MSP, to support and encourage local island business start-up and expansion to sustain the island's economy? Okay, I'll give that to Alan Reid, please.
that's a subject where we want to work with the community, and the Highlands and Islands Enterprise are the body charged with supporting economic development. So it would be a case of trying to encourage local businesses, have a system whereby people who are willing to start up a business, who have ideas of starting up a business, can receive the support they need, whether that be advice or whether that be financial support to start it up. You're correct that the RET is definitely a positive scheme, but there are clearly transport works both ways. But most economic theory would say that when you reduce transportation costs and improve communications, then both sides of the chain benefit, the mainland and the island. So clearly the RET will make it bring more tourists to Mull. We have to encourage businesses that are in the tourism business and give them all the support that they need, and that's working with Highlands and Islands Enterprise to achieve that.
Thank you, Alan. I think there was a good example of this in Oban just a couple of months ago. A large mainland company, Central Belt company, bought over a small business, a large local business, but a small business to them, and there were ended up as being 20 redundancies in Oban. That's the thing that this question is meaning with the increase in business, So I think it's something that a lot of local businesses are concerned about. Would anyone else like to comment on this question? Nope. Okay. I think Jane Stevens, Jane, you have a question? Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the parties if there is a likelihood, an introduction to higher education, university fees. We have many families on the island that are quite concerned about this coming into effect.
Sorry, Jane, could you repeat that? What was the...
University fees.
University
fees. Paying of university fees. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no threat of reintroduction of fees of any description under an SNP government. I say that absolutely because I was the Cabinet Secretary for Education that abolished those fees. I believe that education should be based on the ability to learn, not the ability to pay. And I think that if you have university fees, even backdoor fees, which I think is a Tory proposal, then you will have a situation where you discourage people from going into higher education. Scotland is also different from England in terms of the pattern of its education system. 20 to 25% of university of higher education is taught in colleges, and the reform of colleges is focused much more on those qualifications, and colleges delivering a range of qualifications. So we have a good spread where there are more young people going into positive destinations now, that is either into further education, higher education, apprenticeships which are up to 25,000 a year and about to rise to 30,000 a year, or jobs. We've got better positive destinations, we've got higher numbers of young people in higher and further education, so there will be no fees under an SNP government. We also don't need to have them, because universities are well funded in Scotland and will continue to be well funded in Scotland. So that, no fees.
Thank you, Michael. Any other panelists want to comment? Doral, thank you.
Our position, you won't like this, but it is our position, is that once a graduate is earning at least £20,000, they pay back what's called a graduate contribution, and that is set at £1,500 per year for every year of study. We will create exemptions for those in part-time education, those on low incomes, and those who are postgraduates. But we believe that if you have gone through university education, you should pay a little bit back into the system. And we say that that will produce approximately £100 million to be used in frontline education for people who have passed their 60th birthday. And I find Mike's position slightly hypocritical insofar as, let's not forget that there have been 152,000 college places cut in Scotland.
That figure isn't true.
And
that figure is not true.
And compared to England, where 10% of the poorest, 18% of the poorest 20% of people go to university. In Scotland, only 10% go to university.
I'm going to ask Mike to respond to John's comments and then John wants to comment.
Regrettably, both those figures are untrue. In terms of the numbers of college places, the number of young people at college has remained remarkably steady. What has been removed from the college system, and had to be removed at the time when the whole system was under pressure, was all those courses that didn't produce results, didn't produce qualifications, particularly for young people. Because all of those courses were being very expensive and weren't having the results for young people and older people to get jobs. So that was inevitable and right to do. Now the second figure is a complete misreading of what higher education is delivered in Scotland. It excludes what I have just been talking about in terms of the 25% of higher education delivered in colleges. In actual fact, the opportunities for young people in Scotland to get further and higher education in Scotland are greater than those south of the border, and that is partly because we do not have fees. It's absolutely a no-brainer. If you impose fees, you put people off because they don't want debt. And finally, of course, people do pay more. Because if you go into higher education, you will almost inevitably earn more. And therefore, you will pay more in taxation. So what is being suggested by the Tories is a double taxation. It's over and above the extra taxation you pay, you'll be hit with another one. Actually, an increase in the marginal rate of over 4% for somebody becoming a teacher when they come out. Nobody would want to do that. So those figures are wrong.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I'm glad Donald got the opportunity to tell his party's policy. I think it's important. Mike's right, I know this question is about colleges, but there is a role for vocational training as well. I think I want to say that. But I would also want to know if it's Donald's view that a company, a multinational corporation, for instance, that benefits from public money, if it subsequently goes on to make profit, if that money should be recouped back. Because even a modest clawing back of money that had gone in the form of grants. And I can think, for instance, the Scottish Government gave a £2 million grant to Lockheed Martin. They're the largest arms dealer in the world. They made $3.4 billion profit. The Scottish Government gave them $2 million. So I certainly would be happy to look at how money is dispersed, but education should be free, full stop, no questions.
Alan?
Yes, I agree. Education should be free, full stop. I mean, 4 parties in this election agree with that. Only the Conservatives disagree. So I'm very confident that the Conservatives are not going to win an overall majority in the election. So I think you can be confident that tuition will remain free.
I think Mick is.
Yeah, it is interesting that when I was briefed by my party on this issue, they came up with the figure of 152,000 college places have been removed under SNP government. Now that's over the 10-year period. That's the figure, and if the Conservatives are saying it and Labour are saying it, I think there's possibly some truth in it. But there we are. Having said that, it is certainly the case that we are the only party that are saying that those who earn more than 150,000 will pay the 50p top rate of tax, and all of that money raised in Scotland will go to support education. It will be earmarked solely for education. We are saying that. The other point is, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Mike, I have been briefed by my party that under the SNP, 4,000 school teachers have been lost across Scotland as a whole during your period in office. So that's what they tell me. I don't think that you're doing quite the job you're making out.
Well, you know, Mick, you are not wrong about 4,000 teachers. The problem with that is the vast majority have been got rid of by Labour authorities. Not by the SNP. Teachers are employed by local authorities. So Labour is responsible for that figure. So you got the figure right, you just got the attribution wrong.
Okay. Everyone else has commented. Any other questions from the floor? dead on 9 o'clock. No more questions. Nobody's got any questions that they want to ask any of these 5 gentlemen. Nothing about berries, nothing we've done. We've looked at care of years. I was smiling about the percentages of university children that go on to university. Part of my remit is children who are in care, and unfortunately only 1% of children brought up in care go on to university. So that is what Argyll and Butte have set up a corporate parenting board, and we are working on increasing the attainment of our looked after children. So, we're arguing about what percentage and how many 100,000, but spare thought for the ones that... Chris?
I would like to ask the candidates, with RET, which the government brought in, which has been very nice for the community, it's also nice for the visitors, but what are they going to do about extra money to cover the roads that are being pounded by these extra cars? It's no good asking Argyll and Butte for the money, they haven't got it. This is an extra bit of money that's got to be found by central government to make certain that our roads will stand up to this. The second thing is that it's great if you're a private individual using the ferry, you get RET. No commercial gets it. They used to in the very first time, and it was pointed out early on when it was taken away that there would be a rethink about how to bring back RET for commercials, because at that time the commercials didn't pass on the benefit to the customers. Now, what has been done, if anything, and what will your party do, yourselves and the party do, to rectify this so that we can get reasonable priced goods onto this island, housing, all our house materials coming from outside, that will help to reduce the house prices, get us some better housing into the place, and it goes on all the way through to food.
Okay, does anyone want to take this question? John?
Yeah, the principle of anything, whether it's a car, a house, or a road, is that you inspect it, you repair it, and then you replace it. We haven't done any of these in respect of the vast majority of roads in Scotland, or indeed piers in Scotland. And as I say, it's because of these vanity projects. And the rich get rich and the poor get poorer. If you've got a good road, they'll want to make a dual carriageway. It's a dual carriageway, will want to be upgraded to a motorway, and then all the time people on the islands and landward areas of Scotland are driving through potholes. So it is about priorities. I have to say, and I was over in Mull last year at a meeting, and I was very surprised at what I was hearing about RET, because if you'd said to people a number of years ago, we'll reduce the fares, people would have been very pleased. And I understand the point you're making about the consequences of it. Can I say that as someone who was a Highlands and Islands list MSP, so covering from Campbell and Maroon to Shetland, the people in Shetland are right to agree because it's not getting RET. But of course, applying the formula, they wouldn't have benefited. I think the Scottish National Party have undertaken to look at that, and certainly Orkney would have benefited. But you do get into very, very technical areas, and the technical areas that certainly Mike will recall being involved in were van sizes and dimensions and what could and couldn't be done. There is a finite budget. Certainly the position of the Scottish Green Party is that we look at the infrastructure, including the ferries, as being the same as a road. No one would debate whether you are going to maintain a road properly, the M8 properly. I think we need an attitude that says that ferries are lifeline, and this links into the rather unfortunate situation that the decision on the tendering of the Clyde and Hat Hebrides isn't going to take place till after the election. Now that's very unfortunate, and I for one pushed along with other members of the RMT group in the Parliament to have decisions made more timely than this. I think there's a whole range of issues. They are about what are the consequences of one decision. An impact assessment of all the consequential impacts needs to be done. Certainly the Green Party's view is that we would stop these vanity projects and we would maintain our existing infrastructure.
Thank Thank you, John. I think Alan, you wanted to come in on this?
Yes, I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that the roads in Mull are terrible. I mean, when I was a Member of Parliament, the places where I get most complaints from roads were Mull and Iona. I think that goes to show that the islands don't get their fair share of expenditure on roads. I mean, I was pleased that at the budget meeting, whereas a lot of the focus was on the cuts, but one benefit out of the Council's budget meeting was that they did put more money into the roads budget. So, if I was a member of the Scottish Parliament, I would certainly be wanting to insist that Mull and Iona got its fair share of that expenditure. But the Council just doesn't have the money to solve the problem on its own. The Council needs more money. Now, Island Bute Council gets treated unfairly by the Scottish Government. That's not a party political point, because exactly the same unfairness happened under previous Scottish governments. Where Island Bute Council gets treated unfairly is what's called Special Islands Needs Allowance. That's money that goes to Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles. Some of it does come to Island Bute, but nothing like the same proportion that the formula gives to Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles. So when I was a Member of Parliament, I was constantly making the case to Scottish governments of all colours about the need for Island Bute to get its proper share of Special Islands Needs Allowance. The situation has improved, but has improved only slightly over the years. We have to make sure that Island Bute Council gets the money that it actually needs to be able to repair the roads and deliver other services over this vast area. So that's an important campaign that I would be waging if you elect me as a member of the Scottish Parliament. The second part of the question was about RET. Yes, I agree that RET should also apply to commercial vehicles, because by doing that you would bring down the price in the shops. Because obviously everything that probably about 99.99% of what comes onto the island does come on the Calamine ferry. So bringing down the ferry prices for commercial vehicles would bring down prices in the shops. And of course, this does link into the roads question as well. But obviously, the material to repair the roads has to be brought onto the island as well. So if we can bring down prices on the ferry, then obviously we bring down prices to repair the road. So as a Member of Parliament, I would certainly be arguing for RET to apply to commercial vehicles and for the Council to get its fair share out of Special Islands Needs Allowance.
Thank you, Alan. I think Mick, you wanted to...
Got it. I can remember at the last series of hustings in the last election, Sir Jamie McGregor, who was the Conservative candidate, used to joke that his friends on Mull would say they don't so much drive on the left, they drive on what's left, which I thought was quite a good joke at the time. Having said that, my party has been campaigning for a road equivalent population analysis, because it doesn't seem to me right that in Argyll and Bute, where we have a very extensive road network, given the nature of the area, and then you divide the size of that network by the population, it's a huge burden on the population and on the council to maintain that road network. So that ought to be a factor in the allocation of funds from the Scottish Government, and we have already campaigned on that, and we would continue to campaign on that. We would also want to see more trunking of roads, because once they become trunked, they become the responsibility of Transport Scotland. And we would like to see more of that happening, because the trunk roads don't seem to be quite as many in Argyll as perhaps it ought to have. So those are other things that we'd want to take up.
I'll maybe ask Mr. Russell to sum up on this one, please.
Let me start with RET. I'm very, very proud of RET as a policy. And the reason I have a particularly strong feeling about it, is because when I was much younger, I lived in Uist, and there was a group of young Turks who worked in Uist, myself, people like Brian Wilson and others, and at that stage we had a sort of more political agreement than we have now, and one of the things we used to talk about all the time was get RET imposed, because it was a wild idea in the late 1970s, you would imply it. And I'm very proud to have been a member of a government that brought it in. And I'm also proud to have been involved in trying to juggle with some of the regulations. I mean, we've heard John's talking about lengths of vans. I remember a whole month in which I was pressing for the length of the van that qualified to go from 5 metres to 6 metres. And we got the 6 metre. So that sounds the small stuff of politics, but it's very important. And I'm pleased we've done it. And people know in this hall that there was some anger in Mull, that Mull was the last of the islands to benefit from it, but it's there, and it's in. So I think it's a good thing, no matter what. But freight charges were not passed on at the start of the RET first pilot. Not one, but 2 reports said that. So in order also to afford to roll it out throughout the network, freight was removed from it. What is happening now is there is the review of freight charges across the network. And after the tender is awarded, and I hope CalMac get the tender, I've said that publicly several times, after the tender is awarded, then the review of freight charges will kick in. And I hope that review of freight charges will recognise just what you've said, that it is a major impediment to development and indeed to keeping people on islands. And because the government's policy is very strongly to support and to encourage the islands, and the Islands Bill the Scottish Government has offered will come into the next term if the SNP is elected, which talks about island-proofing all the policies, then this is a policy that will require island-proofing. And they'll have to look at freight charges and say, we need to do something to make this work. So I think that will happen. But you're also right about the connection with the main roads. And certainly, probably the other roads also suffer, and I go back to this point, our Galloway Council is the best funded authority on the mainland, and it also gets substantial island funds, but the Rural Regeneration Initiative needs to look at things precisely like this. Capital projects that would not otherwise be possible unless there was special help, and to recognise the special needs of our Galloway Council in terms of depopulation and connectivity, and this is a connectivity issue. This is actually an issue I've already raised with the Scottish Government on 2 occasions and said the consequence, the success of RET will demand further investment, and particularly on the road from Craignure to Tobermory. So that is something that has to come next, and that needs to be pressed for. But I'm pleased with what we've done so far, but there's more to do.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, can I ask for any final questions? No more questions from the web? There seem to be funny questions. There's a lot of giggling and laughter.
Just the
But they're
responses.
not obviously going to share them with us.
We'll see later.
Anyway, all it leaves me to do then is to thank Mr. Finnie, Mr. Cameron, Mr. Reid, Mr. Russell and Mr. Rice for coming tonight, answering the questions so openly and honestly, as much as you can associate honesty with any politicians, as people keep telling me.
Speak for yourself.
Well, as people keep telling me. So I'd just like to thank MICT and Mull Community Council, and particularly Steve Willis, because I know you've done a lot of work, Steve, organising this tonight. The only thing that's left for me to say is please use your vote, irrespective if your party's not here tonight. Use your vote. It's so important because people don't vote and then the result is not what they want, and there's a huge cry, and I think that's been so obvious in some of the budget funds. So please use your vote and have your say and make a difference. Okay, thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Thank you everyone online for staying with us as well. I hope this was of use to you. If you want to watch it again, you can see it on the Periscope channel. Thank you.